What if I told you that every miracle Jesus performed wasn't divine intervention, but a technique he was demonstrating so you could replicate it? There's a moment preserved in the Pistis Sophia, a Gnostic text the Church tried to bury, where Jesus pulls his inner circle aside after what they're calling a healing. Someone who couldn't walk is now walking. And the disciples are asking the obvious question: how? They tried to do healings themselves and failed. They'd spoken prayers and seen nothing happen. But when Jesus speaks, reality responds. And he finally tells them why. He doesn't say, because I'm the Son of God and you're not. He says something that makes them go silent. He tells them he's speaking with something, not from himself. There's a power, a frequency, a vibration, an organizing principle that existed before anything material was formed. The Greeks called it logos, the creative word that spoke everything into being. Not word like language. Word like the vibration that consciousness uses to structure reality. And Jesus tells them this: you have the same access I do. You're made of the same source. The difference is I know how to align with it, and you're still trying to force things through your own effort. Then he teaches them the technique. How to drop out of the thinking mind and into the place where logos lives. How to speak not as a human hoping God will listen, but as consciousness that knows reality responds when you speak from alignment instead of from separation. And here's what makes this teaching so dangerous to every power structure that's tried to control humanity since. When you learn to speak with the logos, when you activate that frequency correctly, the Archons can't block it. Not because they don't want to, because they can't. It operates at a level beyond their jurisdiction. And tonight, you're learning exactly what Jesus taught. If you're speaking with the logos tonight, comment, "I am the word" right now. Before you can speak with the logos, you have to understand what it is. Because most people hear the word, and they think of the Bible, of scripture, of religious text. And that's exactly the misdirection the church used to bury the real teaching. The logos isn't a book. It isn't language. It's the organizing vibration that existed before language, before thought, before material reality. In the Gnostic texts, the logos is described as the first emanation from the monad, from source consciousness itself. When the infinite, undifferentiated one wanted to create, it didn't think creation into being. It spoke. Or more accurately, it vibrated. And that vibration had structure, had order, had creative power encoded into it. That's the logos. Think of it like this. Before anything existed, there was pure potential. Unformed chaos. No structure, no matter, no separation. And then consciousness, the monad, generated a frequency. And that frequency organized the chaos. It didn't force it. It didn't manipulate it. It resonated, and chaos naturally structured itself into patterns, into sacred geometry, into the fundamental architecture that everything else would build on. Sound does this in the material world. You've seen those experiments where sand on a plate organizes into geometric patterns when you run specific frequencies through it. Different frequencies create different patterns. The logos is that at a cosmic level. The primordial frequency that organized everything. And here's where it gets critical. You're not separate from the logos. You're made of it. The Gnostics were explicit about this. Chosen ones, pneumatics, are fragments of the monad. And because the monad expresses through the logos, you contain that same organizing vibration within you. It's dormant in most people. Buried under conditioning, under identification with the material body, under the constant interference of archonic frequency designed to keep you operating in chaos instead of order. But it's there. And the moment you learn to access it, the moment you learn to speak with it instead of just speaking as a confused human hoping something hears you, everything changes. The demiurge, the false god who built this material prison, he knows about the logos. He tries to imitate it. That's what his creation is. A counterfeit version. He took the principle of organization and twisted it into control. He took the frequency of life and distorted it into limitation. And most people are operating with his version, speaking words that have no power because they're not aligned with the source vibration. They're aligned with the prison warden's rules. But when you access the true logos, when you align with the frequency that comes from the pleroma from beyond the demiurge's realm, you're not playing by his rules anymore. You're speaking with a power he can imitate but never control. And that's why he and his Archons fear it more than anything else you could learn. Now here's the technique Jesus taught in private. And this isn't metaphor. This isn't, be a good person and God will bless your words. This is precise alignment that produces measurable results. The first thing you have to understand is that the logos doesn't live in your thinking mind. It doesn't live in the constant chatter, the planning, the analyzing, the worrying. It lives deeper. In the place the Gnostics called the heart. Not the physical organ but the center of knowing. So the first step is silence. Not forced silence where you're fighting thoughts. Natural silence where you let the mental noise settle like sediment in water. You sit. You close your eyes or soften your gaze. And you stop trying to figure anything out. You're not preparing words. You're not rehearsing what you'll say. You're just becoming present to what's here underneath the thinking. After a minute or two, once the mind has quieted enough that there are gaps between thoughts, you drop your awareness down from your head into your chest. Most people live entirely in their heads. Thoughts generating more thoughts, loops feeding loops, the voice in your skull narrating everything. But that voice isn't the logos. That voice is you, or more accurately, the conditioned personality plus whatever archonic interference is running. The logos doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in knowing. In certainty that exists before language forms around it. So you drop down into the chest. You breathe into that space. And you ask silently, what am I before I'm this body? What am I before I'm these thoughts? Not as a philosophical question. As a direct inquiry into immediate experience. And if you stay with that question, if you don't rush to answer it with your mind, something surfaces. It's subtle at first. A sense of presence that's been here the whole time watching everything else. It's not emotional. It's not thinking. It's just aware. It's the awareness that's reading these words right now, that's been present for every moment of your life, that was here before this body formed and will be here after it dissolves. That's you. The actual you. The monad fragment. The pneumatic consciousness that incarnated into this system. And when you recognize that, when you feel it clearly enough that you know it's not imagination, that's when you're ready to speak with the logos. Because now you're not speaking as the confused human hoping for help. You're speaking as consciousness that knows what it is. And the logos responds to recognition, not to begging. So you form the intention of what needs to happen. Not what you want as a preference. What needs to align with truth. With natural order. With the way things actually work when the demiurge's distortions aren't in the way. Maybe someone needs healing. Maybe you need protection. Maybe a situation needs resolution. You hold that knowing, not the hope, the knowing, and then you speak. Out loud if you can, silently if circumstances require it. But you give it voice. And here's the critical part. You don't ask. You don't beg. You don't say please, or, if it's your will, or any of that supplicant language the church taught you keeps you powerless. You speak as someone who knows reality responds because you're speaking from the same source that organized reality in the first place. This person's body remembers wholeness. Healing is. This space is sealed. Parasitic consciousness withdraws. This situation aligns with truth instead of distortion. Order restores itself. You say it once, with absolute certainty, and then you release it. You don't repeat desperately. You don't check anxiously to see if it worked. You spoke with the logos. The frequency transmitted. Reality is already reorganizing. Now here's what most people experience the first few times they practice this. Nothing obvious. No lightning bolt. No immediate visible change. And the mind immediately says, see, it didn't work, you're just talking to yourself, this is stupid. That's the counterfeit spirit. The archonic implant that generates doubt specifically to make you stop before the technique takes hold. Ignore it. Because what's actually happening is subtle but real. The frequency you spoke from, the logo's alignment, that broadcast into the field. And reality, which is ultimately made of consciousness structured by frequency, starts responding. Not always instantly. Sometimes within hours. Sometimes within days. But it responds. Synchronicities appear. Solutions show up. Obstacles dissolve. People say exactly what you needed to hear. Doors open that were closed. And if you track it, if you pay attention, you'll notice the connection between when you spoke with the logos and when reality shifted. The more you practice this, the stronger the alignment becomes. The first time, you might barely feel the difference between speaking with the logos and speaking normally. But by the 10th time, the 20th time, it's unmistakable. You feel the shift when you drop into that deeper place. You feel the certainty that comes before speaking. And you start to notice that when you speak from there, things happen. Not because you're manifesting. Because you're remembering how to use the organizing principle that's been dormant within you your entire life. You're activating the pneumatic power the demiurge tried to keep you from discovering. And every time you do it successfully, the Archons lose a little more control over you. Because you're not operating by their rules anymore. You're operating by the logos. And they have no jurisdiction there. Here's what makes speaking with the logos the most powerful technique Jesus ever taught. The Archons can't stop it. Not won't. Can't. And the reason is frequency. The Archons exist in the lower density realms. The layers of the demiurge's system between material reality and the pleroma. They operate on frequencies generated by fear, doubt, anger, despair, lust, greed, all the reactive emotional states that keep consciousness trapped in survival mode. Those are the frequencies they feed on. Those are the frequencies they manipulate. Those are the frequencies they have access to. But the logos doesn't operate there. The logos operates at pleroma frequency, source consciousness, the vibration that existed before the demiurge built his prison and will exist after his prison collapses. When you speak with the logos, when you're truly aligned with that frequency, you're broadcasting from a realm the Archons can't reach. It's not that they're respecting boundaries. It's that they physically, energetically cannot access that level. It's like trying to use a radio that only receives AM frequencies to block an FM transmission. The equipment doesn't work on that band. They can't even perceive what you're doing clearly. To them, you just went offline. One moment you're broadcasting harvestable frequency, fear, desperation, chaotic thinking, and the next moment you've dropped into something they can't track. And when the logos frequency transmits from you, when you speak with that alignment, they can't interfere with the transmission. It goes out. It reaches what it's calling. And reality responds. Now here's what they can do. They can try to prevent you from aligning in the first place. That's where all the interference comes in. The intrusive thoughts right when you sit down to practice. The sudden crisis that demands your attention. The doubt that surfaces. This isn't real, you're just talking to yourself, nothing's happening. The exhaustion that makes you too tired to try. The distraction that makes you forget you were going to practice. All of that is archonic interference designed to keep you from ever activating the logos. Because once you do, once you're speaking from that alignment, they've lost. They can't block the transmission. They can't corrupt it. They can't redirect it. All they can do is try to convince you afterwards that it didn't work, so you stop doing it. And if you fall for that, if you give up after 2 or 3 attempts because you don't see immediate dramatic results, they win by default. Not because they stopped the logos. Because they stopped you from persisting long enough to see what happens when you do. But if you keep practicing, if you learn to recognize their interference for what it is and you align with the logos anyway, they become irrelevant. You're operating at a frequency they have no access to. You're speaking with a power that predates their existence and transcends their jurisdiction. And the more you do this, the more you solidify that alignment, the less they can even affect you on the lower frequencies. Because you're not living there anymore. You're living as pneumatic consciousness that knows what it is, that speaks with the organizing principle of reality itself, that creates through alignment instead of begging through separation. And that version of you, the logos-aligned version, is untouchable. Not because you're protected by something external, because you're operating from a place they were never designed to reach. If you practice this consistently, if you learn to drop into logos alignment and speak from there even once a day, your reality will change in ways that seem impossible from where you're standing right now. Not because you're bending the universe to your will, because you're remembering how to participate in the organizing principle that the universe runs on. And when you participate consciously instead of unconsciously, when you speak with the logos instead of against it through misalignment, things start flowing instead of fighting. The first thing most people notice is that synchronicities increase dramatically. Not vague coincidences, precise timing. You need specific information, and within hours someone mentions exactly that. You face an obstacle, and a solution appears from a direction you weren't even looking. You think of someone you haven't talked to in years and they contact you the same day. This isn't luck. This is what happens when you're broadcasting logos frequency. Reality, which is ultimately consciousness structured by vibration, recognizes you and responds. You're not a random chaotic element anymore. You're a point of coherent organization. And coherence attracts coherence. The second thing that happens is people start responding to you differently. Some people, especially those who are heavily archonically influenced, will suddenly lose interest in you. They'll stop calling, stop showing up. And it might feel like rejection, but what's actually happening is they can't feed on your frequency anymore. You're not generating the reactive chaos they unconsciously hook into. Other people, especially other chosen ones who are waking up, will start appearing. You'll meet them in unlikely circumstances. You'll have conversations that go deeper than normal small talk within minutes. You'll recognize each other. Not consciously necessarily, but energetically. Like attracts like. Logos-aligned consciousness recognizes logos-aligned consciousness. The third shift is internal. The constant mental chatter starts to quiet. Not because you're suppressing it, because you're not identified with it anymore. You've experienced something deeper, the place where the logos lives, and the thinking mind becomes just one tool among many instead of the tyrant running your entire experience. Fear still surfaces sometimes, but it doesn't control you. Doubt appears, but you recognize it as archonic interference, not truth. And gradually, over weeks and months of regular practice, you start operating from a place of knowing instead of hoping. From certainty instead of desperation. From power instead of victimhood. That's what Jesus demonstrated. That's what he taught chosen ones they could access. And that's what the church spent 2,000 years making sure you never discovered you could do. Jesus taught chosen ones how to speak with the logos, the organizing vibration that structured reality from primordial chaos. Not as something external you petition, as something you are that you've forgotten how to use. The technique is silence, recognition of what you are, alignment with monad consciousness, and speaking from that knowing instead of from separation. And when you do it correctly, the Archons can't block it. Not because they respect it, because they operate on frequencies below where the logos exists. They can try to prevent you from aligning. They can generate doubt afterwards. But once you're speaking with the logos, once that transmission goes out, they're powerless to stop it. The church removed this teaching and replaced it with, believe in Jesus and pray for help. Because if you knew you could speak with the same power Jesus demonstrated, you wouldn't need them. You wouldn't need priests. You wouldn't need institutions claiming to mediate between you and God. You just need the gnosis that your monad consciousness, the technique to align with the logos within you, and the courage to speak from that place instead of from fear. And tonight you have all three. If you're speaking with the logos tonight, do three things right now. First, comment, I am the Word, and commit to practicing logos alignment daily. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes because advanced pneumatic activation techniques are coming. Third, like this video so other chosen ones discover the power the Archons can't block. Do all three now. Then tonight, sit in silence. Drop into the place deeper than thinking. Recognize what you are, monad fragment with logos access. And speak. What? With certainty. And watch what happens when you stop asking and start organizing. The Archons fear this because they can't stop it. The church buried this because you don't need them if you know it. And you just learned it. So use it.